Hello, I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome
To the Commander's Journey.
the place where we discuss our favorite format of Magic, Commander, from the perspective of a new player.
And an experienced one.
This journey is for new Magic players interested in Commander. And here we are back today with another deck tech. We got a budget deck tech for you under 100.
Yes. This one was an interesting one. This one I did a little differently. When I built the deck, it was closer to 250. Then I realized there were like 5 cards that were causing it to go so far over budget. And if I literally pulled those 5 cards out, I was under 100. So yank those out. We'll throw them into the easy upgrades, see if you guys are interested in it. And that way you can add in what you want when you can.
Yep. I think we consider all of our stuff budget, even though we do a bunch of these under 100. But even at the 250 mark for the rest of our decks typically hit that mark, it's still pretty budget. We don't go out and get all the crazy reserve list cards and a bunch of the powerhouses and stick them in there, even though people could do that. Because I think we just know, at least for us and the people we know, the cheaper it is, the more accessible it is to people. And already it's a pricey enough hobby as it is.
Yeah, and the key thing is we want to make sure the deck functions well, right? That I think is the key thing. We're interested in a commander. Sometimes the cheapest you can get with that commander still is on the expensive side. Sometimes it's not. So we'll always try to bring it down to whatever price can make it still functional, but getting the most bang for your buck there.
And so we're going to do a red commander today. Last one from M21. You want to go ahead and read this guy for us?
Yes, absolutely. And, it's our sunset show at the end of M21. We got Zendikar right around the corner.
Was that sunset or sunset?
Sunset, I apologize. Anyways, Gadrak, the Crown Scourge, the legendary creature dragon, is flying. Gadrak, the Crown Scourge, can't attack unless you control 4 or more artifacts. And at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. That's a 5/4.
That's awesome. I mean, he comes out on turn 3, but you typically can't really use him unless you got a lot of artifacts in play. So he looks interesting.
Yeah. There is a version of this deck, well, not version, but sometimes with this deck you get kind of lucky, and on turn 3 you already have 4 artifacts, so it can happen. I'd say maybe it happens 10% of the time. The other percentages of the time you're kind of swinging with them turn 4 or 5, but he's usually turned on as fast as humanly possible. That is really the point of the deck. But again, there are some times where you get to swing in on the turn you play him. Assuming you have haste, but you get there with a swift foot or something. Usually around turn 4, when he can swing for the first time, is when you start to be able to.
That's awesome. And I love the flavor of this deck. You got a lot of dragons, you got a lot of treasures, you got a lot of artifacts. It's very, fantasy oriented, just like what every dragon wants, that treasure, right?
Yeah. It definitely has a lot of dragons in it, just because dragons lend themselves to artifacts, which is really the goal of the deck. And speaking of which, we can go right into game plan.
Yep.
So the main game plan of the deck is to get a lot of artifacts out, and then, combat your way to victory.
There you go. So the first one in our game plan cards that we're looking at is a Loyal Apprentice. It's 1 and a red for a creature human artificer with haste. It's a lieutenant. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. That token gains haste until end of turn, and it's a 2/1.
Yeah, so this is a classic, nice early turn you can do. So pretty much what you can do is, turn 2, get him out. Turn 3, you get Gadrak out. You make a Thopter token, right? And then hopefully by turn 4, assuming you don't already have something with haste or can give it haste, Gadrak can start swinging in pretty consistently.
Another really good game plan card you have here is Genesis Chamber. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, if Genesis Chamber is untapped, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless Mirror artifact creature token.
Same thing. It's one of those things, you're not tapping it, so that the tap clause isn't super specific, but for the most part with Gadrak, you can get that out turn 2. You can then get Gadrak out. You can get the artifact mirror token out, and boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden you're in it, and you're making tokens, and you're going for gold.
There you go. And our most synergistic, at least what I think is the most, because it's a dragon and it makes tokens, is Rapacious Dragon. It's 4 and a red for a creature dragon with flying. And when Rapacious Dragon enters the battlefield, create 2 treasure tokens. And he's a 3/3.
Yeah, so the only downside to Rapacious is it's 5 mana. If it was 4 mana, if it was a little less powerful, I think it would be better for the deck. But you know what? It does everything the deck wants to do. It's a big creature, which is what the deck uses to win. Makes treasure tokens, which is great for ramp. And also Gadrak, will help with that. Get him out there, and it has flying. And a lot of, because there's so many dragons in this deck, and the main reason you're winning is with that flying combat, being able to get in there and deal some damage.
There you go. And our next section, we want to talk about some of the best synergistic ramp cards in here, right? So we got the classic, the Burnish Heart for 3. It's an artifact creature elk. And for 3, you can sacrifice Burnish Heart, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. It's a 2/2.
So Burnish Heart especially is really interesting in this deck because sometimes you really want an artifact out, right? It helps Gadrak, it helps turn on the deck, it allows it to function. So sometimes you really want to be out there as a Burnished Heart, and then later in the game you can turn it into mana, or if you decide the mana is more important than turning on Gadrak, you can go the opposite direction, immediately turn around and toss it away to get those basic lands. But it's a win-win either way, which is why it's in there for synergistic ramp.
Yeah, synergy is key in this. So that's why you're going to have quite a bit of artifacts that'll help you out with ramp. And plus, because you're in a mono color, you always want to have artifacts anyway. So this works out in a lot of ways. A lot of these different cards. This other card in a synergistic ramp is Inspiring Statuary. It's 3 generic for an artifact. It says non-artifact spells you cast have Improvise. And Improvise says that your artifacts can help cast those spells. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 generic mana.
So this is a fantastic card, probably the most synergistic maybe ramp around the deck. There's a lot of good ones though, but this is nice because most of the deck has so much mana rocks in this deck. It wasn't worth listing them all, but most of them are artifacts, so they really help out the deck either way. But this is one that helps bring out your creatures, right? Your non-artifact creatures, your other big dragons, the ones that will help you win the game. And you can then use this to get there, and then use the existing artifacts you have in play, maybe ones that don't tap, or ones that you can just add it in to get that mana cost down.
And then one of my favorite synergistic ramp cards in this deck, which is Treasure Nabber for 2 and a red. It's a creature goblin rogue. And whenever an opponent taps an artifact for mana, you gain control of that artifact until the end of your next turn. And it's a 3/2. And especially in Commander, where everybody's got a Soul Ring out and trying to use it, she's nasty.
Well, especially too, this helps what the deck wants to do in that it gets artifacts on your side. So you'll generally get more ramp cards on your side of the field. It'll help out with that, help you ramp out things harder. What's nice about Treasure Nabber is that, Gadrak can block on its own. It doesn't need the artifacts to block. It only needs the artifacts to attack. So really you only care about the artifacts when it's on your turn. So what Treasure Nabber can do is it goes around and they decide whether it's worth your opponents, whether it's worth tapping, their artifacts for mana and all that. They potentially give it to you, at which point you might end up with 4 by the time Gadrak can attack, just because they gave you all that mana to get there. So there's a nice little back and forth. Is it worth it for them or not to turn Gadrak on? You kind of leave it in their hands with interesting, but if it does, they do give it to you. You get so many bonuses, or worst case scenario, they don't get to use their mana rocks.
Which is a good case scenario for you.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so let's talk about our synergistic card draw in this deck. First of all, let's look at Tome of Legends. That's a newer one, right?
Yes.
It's a newer one.
Throne.
From Throne, right? Yeah. So it's 2 generic mana for an artifact. Tome of Legends enters the battlefield with a page counter on it. And whenever your commander enters the battlefield or attacks, you put a page counter on Tome of Legends. And for 1 and tap, you remove a page counter from Tome of Legends and draw a card.
So this is a fantastic draw engine in the deck because Gadrak will generally be able to swing as it's a flyer, as it gets out early, and this is already an artifact, so it helps turn on Gadrak. You can pretty much guarantee you're at least going to get, especially if you play turn 2, you'll end up with 2 or 3 page counters on it consistently, at which point I'd already, happily put that in the deck. And then sometimes you really get to a point where it's an engine, where every turn you get a free swing in with Gadrak on an opponent that doesn't have a flyer. And then the Tome of Legends will consistently reward you for getting those swings in by letting you draw additional cards.
It's great, especially with dragons when you're swinging to get card draw, especially in red, right? Especially when you be aggressive.
This deck definitely has almost, I haven't run into a mana issue with this deck yet, but, you want to do stuff with that mana, and card draw is really where, you can get your win cons out of it. So anything that helps you draw a card, whether it costs a lot of mana or not, and this isn't even mana inefficient, so it really helps out the deck.
Yep. Speaking of card draw and synergy, we're looking at Bonder's Enclave. That's a new one as well. It's brand new from Ikoria. Yeah. And it's a land, and you can tap it for a generic mana, or for 3 and tap it, you draw a card. You activate this ability only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which you have a lot of power 4 or greater dragons in this deck.
Not only do we have a lot, but Gadrak, again, which is the main thing I'm looking at here. If you have Gadrak out, this is on.
Yes.
And I'm saying Bonder's Enclave is underrated. I think it definitely is. Any deck where your commander hits that 4 or greater mark, Bonder's Enclave should also be in that deck. And this is a perfect example where it's really benefiting the deck. It's really adding that. And, 4 mana for to draw a card isn't the most efficient way to do it. But again, this deck makes a lot of mana. It doesn't have mana issues like a lot of other mono red decks do. So you can often get a couple, triggers of that. It really helps it out.
Yeah, and when it's tacked onto a land that you can also use, it makes it invaluable, really.
Yeah.
So our next category is synergistic single target removal. We always like to have a few of those in the deck. And this card we picked for this is Opportunistic Dragon. It's 2 red and a red for a creature dragon with flying. And when Opportunistic Dragon enters the battlefield, choose target human or artifact an opponent controls. And for as long as an Opportunistic Dragon remains on the battlefield, gain control of that permanent. It loses all abilities and it can't attack or block. And it's a 4/3.
So, this has a lot of single target removal in the deck, but not too many of it is necessarily synergistic with the deck. Opportunistic Dragon is a perfect example of something that is synergistic because I can not only get a 4/3 out, I can steal an artifact, and even if I can't use its abilities on there, it's still an artifact. It still helps Gadrak turn on.
Yes.
It, will still get you to where you want to go. So you have this benefit of then being able to, get an artifact. It doesn't matter. And if you end up taking out a human with it, that's great. There will be times where that ends up being relevant, but mainly it's the steal of the artifact that matters.
Yep. And speaking of removal, for the next category, our synergistic board wipes, part of our removal suite, we picked Steel Hellkite for 6 generic mana. It's an artifact creature dragon with flying. And for 2, Steel Hellkite gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And then if you pay X, you can destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn, and it's a 5/5.
So again, big flyer in the air helps it out. It'll be worth. Things will pay for it because of it being an artifact. It'll lower the price. We'll get mana rocks to get it out pretty early. This one is one of those ones. The main reason why it's synergistic is because it gets the game plan going on both ends, where it's both an artifact and a big creature that you can swing in with flying and do the damage, and then you always have that as an option to remove things, and including non-land permanents, which of course red has trouble dealing with.
So for us newer players, because for me, when I've only been playing for a year, when I first started looking at a card like this, it kind of gets mumbled in your head. But tell me this is how it works. So if I want to pump him, I'm paying 2 or more, right? I can pay 4 or 6 to pump him up, make him a 6 or a 7 or whatever, and swing in. And then if I make contact, then I can pay X and then destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X whose controller was dealt combat damage? Or do I got to pay that X before the attack?
So you actually have to do the damage first. So what is nice about Steel Hellkite, it has the fire breathing. There's a number of cards in this deck that have the fire breathing ability, which is the pay 2 to get +1/+0 or some other variation of that until end of turn. That's just the Quicknomer, what R&D and Magic's End uses as that moniker.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is that Steel Hellkite, they can decide who's blocking first even before you use that ability. So you can attack with Steel Hellkite. They decide if they're blocking or not. So you can decide to use it in a response to their blockers to maybe guarantee kill something, or you can, not worry about it, just do it for extra damage. And then after the damage each dealt, you then can use the X and then get the ability going.
Nice.
And destroy everything.
Just makes it really underrated, really nasty. If you got all the mana to pump into that thing, you can do a lot of damage.
And just make sure you realize that if you do 6 or more for the X, it'll take out Steel Hellkite too. So keep that in mind. You're generally going to lower things, but sometimes you just need a big board wipe, and that'll get you there.
Yeah, so it's converted mana cost X, right? So it has to be the exact mana cost, right? No.
X, yes.
So if you you're trying to take something that's X, like a 7 or an 8, you have to pay 7. It would only take out those things that have 7, right?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I did not make that clear. That's exactly right.
Perfect.
It's just whatever. So you can take out specific mana costs. You can do that board wipe to take out the most important thing. The main thing is it will take out Steel Hellkite if you do it on 6. I apologize. I said that wrong.
No worries. No, I'm just trying to keep it straight in my head because there's a lot of text for us newer players when we're looking at like all the different like ways to swing in and all these different cool ways to cause extra damage. There's a lot of things to consider when looking at that card, but I love it. I love that card. Looking at the next category, that we're going to talk about synergistic recursion and protection. So here's a card, Trash for Treasure. It's 2 in a red for a sorcery that says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact, and then return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
So there's actually a lot of recursion in this deck, especially for a mono red deck. There's a lot that care about specific artifacts, even a few in there that it can be anything, any permanent. So this is just an example of that, where you can sacrifice one of your treasure tokens, get back something that matters a lot more, and then use that instead. So it's not quite an even trade, but you got some advantage on it. And again, there's a lot of recursion. We just only picked one for an example, and I thought that was a good example of one.
Exactly. And since you're wanting to swing in a lot and get a lot of damage, we also, for protection, we added Swiftfoot Boots and a Lightning Greaves, right? Both cost 2 generic mana. The Boots is equipped creature has Hexproof and Haste, and equipped for 1. And the Greaves is equipped creature has Haste and Shroud, which is equipped 0. So that's just a way to really put it onto something and get that damage in, right?
Exactly. And again, this is mostly in there because it gives haste, it gives the protection, so it really helps out the deck on every angle, and it's an artifact again. Help Kurt and Gadrak on. And if you happen to, again, if everything goes right, you get Swiftfoot Boots out turn 2, or let's say Lightning Greaves probably been better. Lightning Greaves out turn 2. You happen to get some of the artifact lands because those are in the deck as well. And then maybe you get another artifact, for some other means with Gadrak out on turn 3. You can equip the Greaves to it and start swinging in turn 3. Again, there's scenarios where on turn 3 Gadrak will be on. Most of the time it's going to be on turn 4, but this helps that. And again, you don't want to lose Gadrak. You win through combat damage or commander damage, and it's really relevant when the boots are on Gadrak to keep that going.
Exactly. And so let's talk a little bit about, after we do all this, right, what is our win con? How do we want to win?
So the win cons in the deck, all of them, almost every big creature is a win con in this deck, and then the artifacts support that to make it better and make it more consistent. But the one probably biggest one, and I know we played a couple games, Joel, and you dealt with this, is Hellkite Igniter. 5 red and a red for a creature dragon, has flying haste, and 1 in a red. Hellkite Igniter gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. It's a 5/5.
Yes. Definitely, it's scary.
How do you feel
scary because one thing you got to notice, whenever there's an ability to pump a creature that is not a tap ability, if somebody's got access to a lot of mana, you can really grow that dragon. Just make him huge. Make that So Hellkite Igniter at any point can become a huge threat, and you could just win with that, right? And then if you,
I think,
go ahead.
No, go. Yeah. I was saying, when the one game that we played with Hellkite, I got him out. You had to block him every time, because if I ever got a free swinging, I was going to pump him up and kill you on that exact turn, so you constantly had to block him.
Yeah, and if I didn't Chaos Warp him, really honestly, he would have probably killed me that next turn.
Yeah, no, exactly. It
Yeah,
was the second I could get a free swing in. I was going to about pump him for like 18 or something,
yeah,
just by a couple pumps, and I just
exactly.
had quite a number of artifacts out.
Exactly. And another card that would help it out and would help a lot of the different big creatures out is Archetype of Aggression, which is 1 red for an enchantment creature, human warrior. It just says creatures you control have trample. And then creatures your opponents control lose trample and can't have or gain trample. It's a 3/2. So with Hellkite, if you grow them and grow them and grow them, it don't matter if I chump block them, right? You just trample right over me.
Exactly. And Archetype is great. It's a mono red card that adds to, that adds trample. It's probably the only red card list I could come up with off the top of my head. It happens to be in budget that gives all your things trample. So it really helps out with the deck. You have a lot of big flying dragons. It'll help get them in there and make sure they deal the combat damage and give you the win.
Yeah, whenever you're running a big creature deck, it's really nice to give everything trample. Because I think, especially in Commander, where people have all these different shenanigans and stuff, they don't always consider, oh, he's going to swing in with a bunch of big things and kill me, you know? They're kind of thinking he's going to pull some crazy combo or do something crazy. And the next thing you know, oh, wait, by the way, all my stuff's got trample. I'm going to pump it all up. You're done.
Yep.
I gotcha.
It's just over at that point. And again, you expected a green and red. It is kind of possible as we have Archetype, but it does take it by surprise a little bit.
Yep. Okay, so those are some great win cons. And let's talk about some of the weaknesses that this deck might have.
Yeah, so we like talking about the weaknesses. I like building in weaknesses. Sometimes it just comes naturally with the deck, and I decide not to fix it. Sometimes I couldn't fix it if I wanted to. This one's a little bit of an interesting one. So probably its biggest weakness is the fact of you're going to have a little trouble if you get a little teamed up against. Most decks will end up with this weakness, but this deck especially, if you have two players or three, God forbid three, but two players even kind of have an eye on you, you have a little trouble going. You need to get those swings in to win the game or stay relevant, and if they just keep on removing your stuff or just keeping you a little in check, you're going to have trouble recovering from that.
Yeah, because it kind of has like a lack of instance, really, the ability to really respond a lot to people's, say, removal or countering you, right? So that also that's a bit of weakness too, right?
And you know what? It does have some solutions to this. With the lack of instance, it is running a much less. So there's a lot of abilities that will activate instant speed, but even then, there's not a whole lot you can do. One of the cards I've added in is Shimmer Mirror for 3 generic artifact creature mirror. It has flash, and you may cast artifact spells though they had flash. It's a 2/2. This is probably another card that will help cover that instant weakness and give all your artifacts be able to play at instant speed to help you out. But again, 3 cards in the deck are the only thing really moving as fast as I'd like it to be.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, that's going to happen, right? If you're around, and you got a lot of dragons out, people are going to think you're a threat right away. They're going to try and remove you anyway. So, other than quickly getting in there with some hasties and knocking somebody out, that's really your answer in this deck with Gadrak.
Exactly. And again, I think red has the trouble if they're not going with the straight burn deck. And I think too, well, the straight burn deck can be fun, There's so many ways to do it. They all kind of end up doing the same thing. Trying to find something different in red is always nice.
Yeah.
And maybe we should move into easy upgrades. We talked about that at the very beginning. Originally this deck was cost a lot more, and then I realized, hey, if I pull out the most expensive things, all of a sudden we're looking really good. But here's all the stuff you could add back in
to make it expensive
that
again,
amount.
If you want to spend the extra money, or you have these cards, pop these in.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Put these
if
in
you
your deck.
have them already, that's an easy thing to do. If you don't, you want to add them in. Probably the first two we're going to talk about is the ones that if you happen to have the extra money, I think between the two of them, it's an extra $40. I recommend it if you can. It didn't quite hit the 100 amount when we added them in. But again, if you can make it work, make it work.
Yeah, and the first one is Dockside Extortionist. It's 1 and a red for a creature Goblin Pirate. When Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control, and it's a 1/2. So he just comes in and makes you a ton of artifacts, which is exactly what you want to do with Gadrak. So easy upgrade.
Exactly. Easy upgrade. It's just $30 frickin' somehow.
Yeah. Because it's rampant.
It only printed in that one deck.
It's rampant red, on turn 2, and people are gonna have stuff out on turn 2. There's gonna be mana. There's gonna be rocks out there. You just stole a bunch of rocks in essence, in a way,
Well, exactly. And it's one of those things only printed in one deck out of, I think, all of 2019. And whenever this happens, where there's something that just is a little better in one of the decks, it just all of a sudden skyrockets the price either of the deck or of this card individually.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we're feeling it. It's a Teferi's protection situation.
Yep. Another upgrade is Hellkite Tyrant for 4 red. It's a creature dragon with flying and trample, and whenever Hellkite Tyrant deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game, and it's a 6/5.
Yeah, this one too. Again, add a Dockside, add this card if you have the money. This is another $10. So even if you just add Hellkite, it definitely is going to help out the deck. It's an alternate win condition that you can definitely hit in this deck. Honestly, this was probably the hardest cut I had to do for the deck.
I was about to ask.
Keep it under
this
100.
is such a nice card, and it's alt win con, and it's so synergistic. But yeah,
I was again this road until the very end. I have it's like $108 the deck I'm currently looking at the price of, and I'm like, shoot, I have one card in here that's like almost $10. I know what I need to cut. I don't want to cut it. I was really against cutting it. So if you have to, if you can add anything and add a Hellkite Tyrant, and it will help out the deck immensely because it's totally possible in this deck very easily to hit that amount. And then you can, of course, steal artifacts, which is fantastic for the deck.
love it. And then another upgrade you have is a Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, which is a land, right?
Yes. Nykthos, it's a legendary land. Tap 1 to add 1 to your mana pool, or tap 2 generic and tap it. Choose a color, add your mana pool, and amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. For this, of course, you pick red. This is just probably the best single ramp card available to a mono color deck. It just also happens to be $20-something, so I will add it in as an easy upgrade.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Josh Lee Kwai special. You can get the Vidal Kanori for 4. It's an artifact. You may cast non-land cards as though they had flash. And this helps because, like we were saying, you don't always have a lot of answers. If you can play at flash speed, that'll help you with responding on other people's turns with blockers or with other kind of shenanigans and such. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no. It definitely adds in that surprise factor. And then we have Worm Coil Engine, 6 generic artifact creature worm, Death Touch Lifelink. When Worm Coil Engine dies, create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature with lifelink. It's a 6/6, so 6/6 Death Touch Lifelink, great big creature, good win condition, an artifact, so it helps out the deck. And then if it happens to die, you'll get 2 slightly weaker versions with each of it, so definitely a great card for the deck.
Yep. Another good land is Inventor's Fair. It's a legendary land. At the beginning of upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain a life. You tap it to add a colorless. And for 4 and tap it, you could sacrifice it, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. And you didn't put this in because, you are not a fan of tutoring, right? Is that
Yes,
that's still the rumor?
Exactly. Definitely hate tutoring. It's $6 too, so again, didn't help out the budget. This was an easy pull for me, but it definitely objectively helps out the deck if you want to do it. I think I have one tutor that's snuck in because I like the other ability on it, and then I happen to have a second ability that's a tutor. So you'll get a little bit anyways, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. I try my best not to include them because I get tired of them.
Yeah. And you're going to find in the majority of the decks we built, because we're a very casual play group, probably on a 6 to 7 power level scale of what's considered out there. We don't really run a lot of tutors, and we don't really run a lot of big infinite combo-y type things, right? It's more like we like just kind of like a lot of those swinging or different fun ways to win. And our games take a little bit longer, but everything runs pretty synergistically. So I'd say, not running too many.
And I think the best part of Commander is the synergy, the really playing off of, seeing what your deck do, kind of getting that cool aspect of look at what my deck does. It synergizes, in an interesting way. Maybe you haven't seen it before, maybe you have, but doing something a little bit out there. And I think too, when you add in tutors, it makes the deck more consistent, which is often a good thing, but it makes you tired of the deck a little faster. And the goal is to make a deck you'll maybe keep for, 5-10 years and still enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, because then it plays a little different each time. And I think, maybe if you're a person that does play with a lot of tutors and you decide, hey, I want to try playing without a lot of tutors, just make sure you have at least 10 card draw spells, good card draw spells, or a little bit more, because then that kind of makes up for it, right? You're drawing more, you're kind of
Yeah.
going through your deck, but you don't always, oh, I'm going to go tutor and get that card or that card. Or you know what? One thing I did, I didn't tell you, Alex,
Okay.
for my Esper deck, my Layla deck, I have the way to tutor in there, and I do have, that's my one deck where I have a combo, right? So I can tutor and go get my
Yeah.
combos. So I have a few tutors, but I also put in what are those Urzas? The lands, the Urza lands in there.
Yeah.
So if I decide I don't want a combo, I could just use my tutors to go get all those pieces and try to ramp. So if I'm in the mood,
exactly.
if I'm
You
in the
got
mood to
options.
combo, or if I'm in the mood to ramp, depending on the game.
That's perfect. You know, it's really trying to make it so you don't get tired of the deck. You're not searching for the same things every time. So you have other ways to win. You're not always stuck winning the same way, because, you know, that'll be fun maybe the first 5 times you play it, maybe 10. But there comes a point where you're like, you know, I win the same way every time. I'm getting tired of it. And you can add, you know, if you just take out the tutors, often you can not get as stale a deck as you could. And speaking of tutors, that's the last upgrade we have. There's a lot of good red artifact tutors I did not include that are even on budget. That would definitely make the deck more consistent and help it out. But again, because I don't want the deck to feel as stale, I did not put them in. But if you wanted to do an upgrade for it, and this is even in budget, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. If that's the way that you enjoy playing it, do it. This is a great deck. It was really fun to play against. I'm sure it would be fun to play. Why don't you actually build it in paper, and I'm gonna come and I'm gonna borrow it, and I'm gonna play it, Alex.
Well, it's on budget. I'm telling you what, it's definitely one I could easily do, and I'm going to point out too. You know, compared to most other mono red decks, because of Gadrak's ability, you don't have mana problems in this deck. At least I never ran into it. That you would have in a lot of other decks, because it's so artifact synergy. Whenever you're playing those mono rocks, you get extra bonuses. You really it helps fuel itself for its ramp issues, and it basically makes it so it doesn't have any.
That's always a feel good. And if you want to buy this deck, it is on budget. Please use below. You're going to see a deck list on Archidect. You can just look at the deck, and it also will have a TCG player a link to the deck. So if you wanted to purchase the entire deck, I'll list it out there. And then we also just have an affiliate link if you want to just buy singles or anything. We really appreciate it if you do. It does help us out. Really, at this point, it's just good encouragement. We're a tiny channel, but we love doing this. So if you decide to buy any of these, please use our link. We appreciate it.
Yes, anything you can do. We're a very small channel, helps us out, gets us going, makes it very exciting. And again, hopefully you guys all enjoy this deck, and we go from there.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
See you.